Hey, it's Mazzy here. I'm with Robert Fiffin, and this is a fun video, Robert's idea, and he'll get into that in a minute. We're going to talk about promo records, white label promos, promo copies, not for sale, freebies, record companies greasing the wheel. And what's great about it, from our points of view, I come from the retail side in the 1970s into the 80s, and then working for labels. So I was getting the greased stuff in the early 70s, and by the end of the 70s I was greasing people like Robert, not actually in radio for me, but at a retail level, record stores, Tower Records, etc. And Robert's going to explain this in a minute because he came up with this idea, but I do want to start out with just briefly this. Now, this is not a promo copy out of our heads. This is the UK OG, the Rolling Stones, but there's a song on here called The Under Assistant West Coast Promotion Man. And it's written by Nanker Felge. That was the fake name that all the Stones collectively got a credit for. So they shared the publishing. And what is great about that song, it talks about a real guy that they referred to during one of their early 65 tours, I guess 64, 65 tours. He was literally a West Coast promo guy, and the whole promo guy wearing the suits and the big cars and thinking he's the star. So it kind of mocks the promo guy, but without the promo guy, you don't get your stuff played. Right?
Where's the bus? Where's the bus?
Exactly. Okay, so Robert, let's get into
the B side of Satisfaction too, isn't it?
I think so.
So yeah, the B side of Satisfaction.
And Satisfaction, unfortunately, is only on the American version of this record. It wasn't on the UK version.
But yeah, I got this idea because I kept seeing people kind of discuss promo things, and they had questions like, why does my Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon have a hole in it? And I would see responses like, well, that's because it was in the bargain bin, deep in the bargain bin, they used to put holes. It's like, I don't think Dark Side of the Moon. There's other explanations for that. So I just thought it would be interesting to just kind of get, especially us two together, because of your experience on a completely different end of it with retail and then the labels, and then my end of it working in radio. It's kind of two different worlds of promo, but kind of the same thing. But and kind of answer some of the people's questions, the people down there, answer some of the questions that people might have had. And yes, let us come down from the mountain.
The little people.
Let you know what's up with some of these promo things: gold stamps, cut corners, white labels, stickers on things, stuff that you can't buy and not sold in stores, all kinds of stuff. So I thought that'd be a good idea just to get us together.
Loaned for promotional use only. So you better give it back.
Right, like the mattress.
30 years later, they're knocking on my door 30 years later asking for those records back. 40 years.
Right. Which has never, have you ever had anybody ask you for?
No, but as we get into this, I'm going to have some stories about that. So do you want to? Why don't you start out with your first victim?
Okay, well, I'll give you two examples right up front, since everybody loves the Tool records. I tried to pick some things that you wouldn't normally show on your channel. I didn't want it to be redundant and show stuff that is always on. So this would be an example like these Tool records. I got these from the labels. They were sent to me when I was in college. This one especially is really sought after. This is a kind of the same album, but two different, variations. This would be what is a promotional album, not sold in stores at all. The only way to get this would be to have it sent to you. It's the Undertow album, one disc version on gray vinyl, which leaves off the track Disgustipated. Not enough room for that. But yeah, this is a promotional item from Zoo, which is the label, or a BMG label. And then this is the same album, but the actual 2-disc version, still in the shrink wrap, still sealed. And the difference, of course, here is at the time you could have purchased this in stores. The only thing that makes this a promotional item is it has a tiny little hole in it. So this would be an example of a post-market promo where there's nothing really special about this pressing or this record. The only thing that makes it promotional is there's a hole in it. Another example would be the Soundgarden here. Basic 1994 pressing of this that you could have bought in a store. Only thing that makes it a promotional item is the gold stamp on the back. That used to show up on the front of CD booklets later on, but this stamp is so iconic. It's around forever. That same font. There's a different version where it's a little bit longer, but
yep.
The iconic promotional stamp, and this is the orange vinyl version of that.
Pretty. Pretty.
Another thing with promotional items, when they're just basically your basic pressing, but the only reason it's promotional is because of a hole or a stamp, is when they sometimes when they have a hype sticker, it's right on the jacket. These would arrive
Because
to
they
the
weren't,
station
because they
in-
were never shrink wrapped. The promo
Right.
items weren't shrink wrapped, right?
Yeah, these would arrive with no shrink wrap. So there's a couple of examples of just your basic pressing. The only thing that makes it promotional is there's a stamp, a hole. Capitol had a lot of that too. That's why there's Beatles
They did,
albums
and what's interesting, people are going to ask, someone's going to ask, why did they punch them out? Well, the thing is, in the 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, record stores, retailers could return records to labels. What they didn't sell, if they're either defects or overstock, they could return it. And they didn't want people to get promo things and return them as regular stock to get credit for full retail, so the store will get that. I picked a bunch of records, and the records that I chose from my collection are all records I got in the day at the time. And I still buy, when I see used records that were promo copies. Promo copies now are highly desirable in many cases, white label promos, stamped records. And we didn't think of that at the time, and we didn't think why. I never knew this in the 70s or 80s, but it makes sense. In theory, a white label promo, a stamp promo, is from the early press runs. And so they tend to be from early stampers. So in theory, they're really well done. And I find, even when you find in used record shops, a lot of promo copies, and now as people my age are croaking or getting rid of their collections the last 15 years, there's a lot of people that were in the business that got promos. And a lot of these guys, and most of them were men, just didn't play those records very much. They had, get so many free records. I would get hundreds of free records every year, and maybe every month in some cases. And you didn't have time to play them all, like, and wear them out like we did. But the very first record, 73, I got worked at the Warehouse Records. I was 19 years old, my very first record job. And this was the very first record that was given to me as a promo. And I remember being so excited because I got a free record and a promo. And that was Grateful Dead, Bear's Choice. Warner Brothers did this wonderful, these are great. And in fact, I think it's one of the companies now, if it's Coal Mine or one of those soul reissue labels, is replicating these to put on new records. I think it's kind of cool. This Warner Brothers thing is great. And this is the Bear's Choice Volume 1. There was never a Volume 2, so that's always something. And of course, what we've learned is the white label promo. And not all promos are white label promos. Sometimes it's just the regular, for instance, later the palm tree label or something else. But as a Grateful Dead fan, I was so excited being in San Francisco to get this on the other end of the spectrum. What's 5, 6, this is 73. In 77, I got a promo of this from, I had friends that worked for Arista. And so the promo guys would give other promo guys records too, as well as when you worked in record stores. At this time, I think I was managing the store. So I got this. And what's cool about this, it's special, and you would probably understand this and explain it, but side 2 of this record has Terrapin Station. It's one friggin', 17-minute long song. So occasionally they would have these special editions for radio, banded for radio play, which means you'd have the whole record, again, another white label promo, and Terrapin Station would be segmented. So a DJ could just play a portion of it. I mean, obviously FM DJs tried to pay the whole 17 minutes or however long the segments are, but a lot of records of this type, they had special editions that were banded. Sometimes there's a little space in between of it. A lot of times it's not, it flows seamlesly, but it has a little momentary pause. In a way, years later, like CDs now, on this probably, I don't know if I have the Terrapin Station CD. My guess is it's coded so you can go to the various segments. So these were 2 extremes of the Grateful Dead.
I don't think it is. I think that's one track on that Terrapin Station.
Is it one? Okay, it just banded so you could find where their segment begins
just easy
and
to
starts.
find. Well, you're playing Grateful Dead. You're going to need as much as, because you're probably out of it. And you go, whoa, where's that song?
Exactly.
But have you, speaking of Warner Brothers promo stickers, have you ever seen the one? I don't think I've ever seen it, where it's Jiminy Cricket or it's Bugs Bunny telling people don't call it punk rock, call it new wave.
Oh, well, I didn't pull them, but I actually have, you know, those Lost Leader records you'd send away for Warner Brothers for
Yeah.
$1. There was some that were given that there's one punk edition with Bugs Bunny as the punk guy for a new wave comp or something. That's the only one I recall. And that was like special promo. And there are promos, which I think we're both going to show, that were only given to radio. Like those two records were actually released to the public, but these are editions sent to radio and
Yeah.
retailers and buyers. But
Yeah,
you know,
the
you're a
first
buyer.
that first gray Tool record I showed was like that. It wasn't available to the public.
Right.
But
The
this
whole
is
thing
another,
was to get you to play it, to get you to play this music.
yeah. Well, it was kind of, we were all about Tool, and it was kind of like a little gift, you know. It was in the 90s, I think that these records were more meant, at least in my experience working at different radio stations, they were kind of meant with more of a novelty a thing, you know. It was more like, oh cool, I didn't realize they still made these. Look at the CD on record, you know, look at how they blown that up, you know. And I don't know too many people that would get excited and grab this and take it home and play it. It would be more like, wow, that's weird, I want to put that in a frame or something, or I want to leave that on the desk and laugh at it, or you know, whatever it is. But it didn't seem like there was as much I don't think the record label certainly didn't expect us to play those in the 90s. They were more just kind of like cool, you know, and they were usually like color vinyl and things like that.
Yeah, it's freebie merch stuff. It's
It's no different than a guitar or something. They don't expect you to play that guitar. You know if you can play the guitar.
Yeah, probably by the time you're at radio, of course, I can't speak for yourself. They stopped
signed Green Bay guitar. But,
they stopped bringing the cocaine to the stations and to the radio record stores and everything. That's a whole discussion right there. Payola is a real and was a real deal, even on a smaller scale in the retail and radio level in some cases.
I was such a smartass. I used to go to record conventions with a, you know, it was the 90s, so it was okay to wear those long sleeve, you know, like the flannel type button up, but open those and then you had a t-shirt on under it. And I would have a t-shirt under there that says, I love payola. And I'd be all around all these record labels looking at me like, you can't.
I wish I kept all the t-shirts I got in the 70s. Now they probably wouldn't fit me anymore, but I got some amazing promo t-shirts of records. So
yeah. But this is an example of a CD that's banded for airplay. This Woodstock, not only banded for airplay, but advising you as I do on some of them to please review before airplay. But you know, live albums where each track, you know, it's just a cheering going into another song. If you listen to, it's not really meant to be listened to in full. It's meant to be have your separate tracks played. The cheering fades out. You go to the next track, it fades back up. The song plays, cheering fades out. So it's kind of annoying to listen to all the way through. But I've got a Caius CD. That the retail version I still think is just one long track one, that's it, and the radio version, you know, it cuts it up. And
they did a lot of,
from Prince originally released like that.
Yeah, I didn't even pull, but I got over the years in the record period a lot of interview LPs that you never really listen to, maybe once if you're lucky, and then later CDs too. So
I've got a whole story about interview. I've got a whole thing about interview CDs. We'll get to that.
Okay, I'm going to show just one more Warner Brothers, just because this is a special record to me. My buddy Vernon, who hired me, who I lost a couple years ago, passed away. He hired me, and he turned me on to Emmylou Harris. And the promo guy gave him, when this record came out in '75. For some reason, I didn't realize right away. He said, "Do you want this promo?" And I said, "Well, who is it?" He goes, "I'm getting you one, a special one for you." And he asked the guy because if he could have a second one for me. And I didn't realize it was the woman who was on the Graham Parsons records, because I heard those, but it's, you know, the back of the Graham Parsons that says "Little with Emmylou Harris," and I just never occurred to it. So got this promo, love this record, and we actually at this time saw her at the boarding house. She played 3 or 4 nights early on. So this is one I just like. Again, somebody's a little more sentimental to me, and this is one of them.
But you were talking about how white label promos might sound a little better. There's another theory with that too, with radio, that, you know, those white label promos sound good because also these are going to be played on radio stations that have decent equipment, going to be broadcast out to people to advertise these records, so they'll go out and buy them. That's where you want your best sound from, is these radios. So, and yeah, some of the ones you don't want because the radio station has played it a million times, and then sometimes it never got played at all. So.
Exactly, and they're given to the guys to take home. The guys didn't play them at home. They're so wrapped up. You'd be surprised how many people in that area didn't play a lot of music at home. They go to shows all the time. They get these freebie records. And another issue that was realized, you'll realize why some of these labels of not for resale changed, because there are a lot of guys, promo guys, selling records to used record shops, which were not mixed in with new record shops in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it's like they'd sell their box of whatever and make a couple $100.
I wouldn't do that. I would trade. I wouldn't sell. Hence the big collection there. But I still have CD promos for things like Matchbox 20 and the Goo Goo Dolls that are still sealed. They just brought them home and put them in.
I used to have box of promos, and we'll get to that a little later in this discussion.
I think a lot of radios that you'd have your box of promos out. Everybody takes whatever they want or whatever. But you were talking about interview albums. Here's something that really broke a lot of our hearts and really kind of disillusioned a lot of us early on in college. We received this Henry Rollins interview kit CD. And this is, I only seen, somebody did a video like expose on this or whatever recently, but I've only really, in my whole career, I've only seen like 3 or 4 of these. But I remember what it is basically is it's Henry Rollins just answering questions. And he's doing it in a way that it doesn't even sound like there was an original interviewer. You can even see this release on Discogs. It's not
making
like a
stuff
radio.
up.
Yeah, and it lays it out like all the questions are there, so you can read the question and then you play his answer, and it's like you're interviewing Henry Rollins. It's like this total bullshit. I mean,
that goes back to days of the Beatles when you get these records and you hear them answer the questions, and you get the sheet inside that has all the questions that each local radio station would have to. I'm talking to Paulie or George.
Exactly. But in my experience, I've only seen this like 2 or 3 times. And to think that Henry Rollins, Mr. Integrity, Mr. Above Board, no BS, is the first thing it kind of disillusioned me. It's one of the first times you kind of see behind the curtain, like, wow, Henry Rollins has got an interview kit where we're pretending to interview him. And we just had so much fun with it. We came up with our own questions, and he was, then we'd play his answer, and he sounded like he was aloof. But yeah, so he's broke some kids' hearts.
He's a mere mortal hawking his wares like everybody else.
Yes, right? But when you're a college student in 1993, you can have your heart broken with that.
Joni Mitchell's, to me, this is one of the best sounding promos I got. It's got the not for sale, obviously, just not for sale. But I like this. I mean, this is a beautiful sounding record anyway. But again, one more white label promo. So far, what I'm showing are just records I like, and I got as promos. Again, now in the last 10 years, whenever I see a white label promo, I check it out and I see if it's been played or not, because they are very desirable and they tend to sell for a little more depending on the record. So this is a great. Jaco Pastorius is on here. That his bass playing on here, it sounds really lovely, really beautiful.
When did that come out? That's like a
76 or 6? 76. Yeah.
Yeah, this is an example of, this is George Harrison, just a quick example of another thing they would used to do besides the cut corners and the holes, where they would just slice a thing in it. And I think this isn't a radio promo. I think this was probably, I remember this being in a bargain bin. This didn't do too well.
Well, that's the difference with cutouts. Exactly. Where they cut them so they can't sell them back for a full price.
Right, but they would do the same thing to radio, so you never knew. But something like this could have been from a bargain bin. Something like, what are some more cut corner classics, like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band soundtrack? If you see that with a cut corner, it's probably from a bargain bin. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles, if you see a hole in that, it's probably from a radio station, because that was never in a bargain bin.
Mom's Apple Pie. Do you remember Mom's Apple Pie?
I talked about that in a video I did 2 videos ago.
Oh, okay.
That's crazy, with the censored, uncensored.
Yeah, that was in the cut up bins, and I never picked it up. It was in the cut up bins forever.
I've got a video called Rare But Who Cares, about all these rare but no one cares, and that was one of them.
That's definitely one of them.
But I had to ask you, since you worked in retail and you're talking about returning things, this kind of thing used to happen a lot. You know, where they would just jam it in there and it would fold like that. Did people return these, or were they okay with them?
No,
That's
I
what
mean,
I
that's
thought.
just the pay.
Exactly.
Well,
If this happened now, people would return it. I guarantee.
having said that, there were people. That's a whole other conversation I could have. What like I want to do with the retail difference. There were guys like for some reason I remember MCA Records around the time of Quadrophenia and Belton John's Yellow Brick Road. You lost a little light. Oh, Yellow Brick Road.
I don't know what's going on.
Yellow Brick Road. Worst pressings ever, and there are a lot of warps. I don't know if the covers because they were thick with the booklets and everything. And I would have there's this one guy I remember would come in and he wanted to open an entire like box of Quadrophenia because they were all bad. And he wanted, I said, after 3 of them, I said, you can't open anymore, pick something else out or get, you know.
Right.
And he would put the record on the counter and push each corner to make sure it wasn't warped right in front of us. And I said, look, pick something else out. I'm not gonna, because most people, a slight warp, you know, you're forgiving if it's not knocking your changer over. But people were picky in some ways, but the stores could return them then. Now the stores can't return them. That's the difference.
I just think if somebody got a folded like inner sleeve like that now, it would be a definite return.
Some wanker would definitely say that, but not me. Okay. Mr. Fitton.
Box sets, if you didn't have the you know, they wouldn't send the whole box set because those take a lot to make to the radio stations a lot, so they would send these samplers. So I have a lot of these where I don't have the big, I keep doing that wrong, I don't have the big box set, but I do have the JJKL box set sampler and the Funk is Back Funk Essentials sampler as well, with just a few tracks on there. Speaking of things that were sent to radio stations that weren't really you know, available for retail, you know, spoken word type stuff. You also had comedy things like Chris Rock, just to make things. Now you can put Chris Rock in the hashtag and make it all timely. Yeah, we get things like these just for radio.
He should change his name to Slappy White.
It's interesting. I have a Chris Rock CD, but I don't have anything from Will Smith. The one with the legit career. But
samplers were a big deal. Samplers were a big deal.
Yeah, that's what I was going to show, is actually some radio stations. These would come from radio station publications, and they would send these out like sometimes every other week or every month, depending on the publication. And it would basically be just everything going for radio ads that, you know, that week or whatever. If you were a smaller radio station, you didn't get serviced by the labels, maybe you could count on these guys to kind of fill in the gap. You had one, the Rock Tune-Up from Album Network, another publication that radio stations use called FMQB. Theirs not only would feature songs, but they would feature breaks, as you can see here, from different morning shows and whatever all over the country. So each time you get to see what, you know, somebody from Arizona is doing, and oh, they're doing the same thing as everybody else. Concert comes through, you get a radio promo like this, like Lollapalooza, to kind of fill in some gaps there, some bands that are on the concert. So, you know, none of this obviously available for retail. I thought this was interesting. They used to send these out to more alternative type stations, and you'd hear these stations all over the country about DJs going into their own personal 45 stash and getting their whatever. These tracks down here were usually rare. Like this one has a Beastie Boys track called She's On It that a lot of people couldn't find for the longest time. And you'd hear DJs put especially this section down here on there, and be like, oh yeah, I went into my dusty 45s. You can't believe what I found. I found this. But over everything, most radio stations, mainstream, like oldies or hit stations or adult contemporary in the 90s, especially late 80s, would have this from a company called TM Century. These are gold discs. And this is what a lot of radio stations all over the country were playing when CDs first came in. It would just be the hits. These were serviced from this thing. You just signed up for, you know, paid for it, and they would send you these every week. You'd have gold discs, which were, you know, older hits, and then you'd have hit disc, which were the new ones. As you can see there, they'd have the intro time, the running time, whether it ended cold or fade, and the year it came out as well. But this is number 155. I mean, they went, I mean, entire libraries. It's interesting because you could get the Beatles on CD with this, technically, in like 1980, you know,
54. Yeah. I remember I didn't get a lot of, by the time the CDs came out, I was out of the record business, but I still had friends in it. So I got some. I remember getting a number of, you know, advanced copies of albums like Tom or John Fogerty from Warner Brothers and Morrissey and things. And they were in cardboard sleeves rather than jewel cases. It was before the release and it had a promo thing on it. Sometimes different information, but I didn't get a lot at that point.
Yeah, usually they would look something like that, where it's white label type of.
This is interesting because this one has a press kit in it. This is in 1977 from Capitol Records, and it says, "Dear journalist," and it talks about this record. And this is about a record that Capitol Records was mum. Who is this band really?
Oh, right.
Flat Two.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a whole like press kit in it. Who is this? Could this be the Beatles? Beatles rumor,
Wow,
craziest ever.
Now you're going way behind the curtain. Yeah,
and
I thought radio was bad.
I mean, of course, Calling Occupants. I think it's the most hilarious thing about this song, Calling Occupants, which is Beatle-esque. Doesn't even sound like the Beatles, but it's Beatle-esque. But I think the funniest thing is that the Carpenters covered that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like Carpenters to me.
Well, they covered it, but this is the original, and they perpetuated this rumor of these two guys. I think they're Canadian. Yeah. That we don't know who it is. We just have this tape and this record. So this whole press kit.
Yes. And when you hear it, I'm glad you have that, because it's whatever retail is, it's 40 times worse than radio, because we're actually selling this stuff to the public. And it's always supposed to be this, like, especially back then, it was this rumors going around. We don't know somebody just started, and it's always right from the label. It's always right from the promotional.
And of course, working in the store, I was the Beatle guy. So anything related to Beatle promos, I got as a promo. And while I'm just going to keep the Beatles shit together right here, just because two more things that are around the same time. 77. I did get a promo copy of the album, but when the Beatles put out their first official live album, Hollywood Bowl, I got an 8-track, a 4-song sampler from the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, wow.
8-track.
I've never seen that.
I never opened it. And then in 78, I got this. This was the 12-inch single that has only 4 songs or 5 songs from the Ruddles. But what was great about it, I went to a premiere at a hotel in Fisherman's Wharf, and Derek Taylor, who was in the 60s the PR guy for the Beatles and the Byrds, worked with the Beach Boys, was there and introduced, and we saw a preview before it was on NBC of the Ruddles, and it came with this press kit, Ruddlemania, and this was sort of a recreation at the time on Broadway in New York. Beatlemania was everywhere, and they kind of took over that, and it has the Costa press kit, so it's kind of nice. I mean, press kits were a big part of it too in retail. You get press kits, and of course, here's my Ruddle button, Ruddles, the prefab 4. So the thing was getting, posters up I wish I kept, when I closed my office about 12 years ago, I had literally boxes and boxes of posters, and I ended up kind of giving them away to people. And now all this shit is worth,
I mean, the silliest stuff is worth insane. If you want to talk about value, like I just show those 2 albums. I used to play CDs on the air way up until about 2002. We were still playing actual CDs, and so we would have these CD singles, which were just, I don't think I have an example of any, but here's one. This is a funny one, but we would have these CD singles where it would just have 1 or 2. 90s, it meant usually the clean version and the album version, and the Tool CDs, especially, where it just has 1 song. It's the same version that's on the album, nothing different. $400, and they were just sitting in the studio getting play. And we would have like 5 different copies, and we'd throw them away and use them for like jewel cases and whatever.
I had a Bruce Springsteen Backstreets stand-up cardboard thing from in the back from Born to Run. That thing, after I got rid of it, gave to someone, I found out it went for like $800 to $900 or something outrageous like that.
This is crazy. This is
you can't keep it all, but the what do they call it? Not merch. What are we talking about? This stuff.
Product?
Not product. The freebies, the promo stuff. But they call it
tchotchke.
Kitsch, tchotchke. There's a term. I mean, someone right now is at their house drinking a brewski and yelling at the screen right now. Maslov, yes. It is.
Why do these two people not know the term in their own
swag?
Industries?
Swag.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Swag.
The reason I don't know that is because there's another station that was close to us that had that as their official, so we were not allowed to say that that word. But here's an example of a CD single, autographed, by the way, from Everlast. A really good example of a CD single for a radio station from the 90s. Here you have 7 different versions of the song. You can get it with no curses, no drugs, no guns. With an edit, you can get it with the no curses, but the guns with no drugs. You can get it with no drugs, but guns and no curses. All of them have no cursing, basically, and either with one of the 3 things or 2 of the 3 things, and then different time edits. So yeah,
Those are
welcome to the
cool.
90s.
I love those versions of CDs and LPs that had various versions. Of course, in the late 70s into the 80s, when the whole disco, there would be these things with disco mix and the expanded mix and the this mix and that mix. And
well, that's just censored stuff, you know, and they would either drop out.
But sometimes it was just it was, you know, DJ dance mix that was, you know, until the record companies smarted up and you could buy 12-inch single dance mixes. At first, you get a special 12-inch. The whole 12-inch 45 thing started, and it was promo stuff first. But then the DJs were getting copies, and the record companies would make them for sale, but not at first.
This is an example of what happens when a group, you know, has a big song out, and a label will send out basically a kind of a retrospective, a best of or greatest hits, but it's not something that you can buy. It's only for stations. The Sonic Youth.
Ooh, that's cool.
You know, I don't think they have a real legitimate compilation, do they? I think they just have albums.
No, now they're putting out these sort of bootleg series things now, but it's not a comp as far as I know.
But yeah, that's an example of that. And this is kind of interesting. Again, going back to the Henry Rollins, people with integrity type thing. Here's Neil Young with a specially remixed radio version of his Sleeps with Angels.
That's a favorite album of mine. I love that record. What's remixed about it? That's weird. What is it?
It's a little more compressed, and basically what that means visually is the VUs are just going to go and sit there.
So basically what Neil Young hated about CDs, his record company promoted.
That's why I wanted to show that, because I've seen this from Kiss, you know, I've seen this from
Wars.
Bon Jovi.
The Loudness Wars. Yeah.
Well, it's not really, I guess, an early version of that, sure. This was really good around 91, 93. So it was kind of before that. But yeah, the radio mix thing where it's got to be, you know, it really Kiss, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, the groups you would expect that from. They kind of sound like that anyway, at least Kiss from that time. But
no dynamics whatsoever. No Neil Young dynamics there.
No. You're definitely not going to have things popping out or kind of like in a distance or.
I love that. I love that record. That's a favorite Neil Young. I'd love to have that on vinyl, and it's very rare. I think it only came out in Germany. It'll eventually, as Neil Young is doing his archive series, will come out. I love that record.
Yeah, that's highly underrated. A lot of his later.
You mentioned this before. What Columbia did, and as much as we hate it because it wrecked the cover, when you think about it, it makes sense. Okay, this whole thing, you know, to radio. When you're at radio, you're not giving shitty artwork. You're not showing artwork out to your audience and everything. But right away, you grab the record and you can see the cuts. And there's little boxes like a program director, a music director can list the cuts that their station should play. And it's a great, exactly. So as much as we don't like it, it kind of makes sense. And to remember, these weren't for us to bring home like we have now, really.
Right.
And of course, DJs did. Record store. In fact, this is a copy I got in '76. And now, one thing I'll say about the music, when I got this, I didn't get it. And to this day, I think when I've ever played this now, it's the greatest punk album. I saw this tour in Austin, Texas, the Hard Rain tour, and he just belts it out and yells. What's great about this is that it's a white label promo again, you know, and it's pristine. I played it, and it sounds really good. And what's great about it, the Columbia guy brought it in, the promo man, the West Coast San Francisco promo man, and gave me this, which is considered pretty rare now. It's a Rolling Thunder Review belt buckle. And that's when we were talking about swag. One of the most interesting things of swag, I remember, I don't have it anymore. I don't know where it is. I can't remember what label it was. Someone's going to, again, yell it out. The artist Delbert McClinton, who's countryist artist. It's the guy that originally in the UK, he's American, but he taught John Lennon how to play a harmonica. Anyway, he had an album, and I think the album cover looked like a wallet. So they gave out these plastic wallets, and in the promo had Delbert McClinton written on it, but it had like an outline of a condom that was inside the wallet for like years. You know,
Right.
the circle thing on it. I don't have that anymore, but getting swag like this. I also have a
Yeah.
wing. I have a Wings belt buckle from
I
Wing.
did a video on some of the stuff I got in college. I've got a Ministry condom, and I've got little Beatles stuff that used to be a bubblegum record that were in there, but yes, the
Yeah.
sleeve.
Anyway,
But
I had a Wings Over America one too from Paul McCartney with a W. Problem is the W's are pointy, so you bend over and it sticks in your in your stomach there. So merch stuff, swag stuff's great. We all wanted this shit. We all love this shit.
Motley Crue beer, not beer, I guess it's non-alcoholic, but yeah, Motley Brew. And you were talking about all the cocaine they used to give. We just had the
No,
drink cocaine that stupid stuff. I mean, yeah, you're not probably going to get that in the store. But yeah,
My
the dumbest stuff.
introduction, yeah, I'll admit, I haven't done blow since 1983, and I first partook in my record store days. I was assistant manager, and the manager was in the office with a promo guy from a label for like, I don't know, half hour, and he came up and the guy says, Norman, there's some work for you in the office. And I just didn't know. We had one of these small offices in the back with one of those double doors. The top opens up at a little platform. And he goes, but close the door when you get in there, because he goes, I'll watch the register. There's only two of us on a Friday night or whatever, or three of us. I would go back there, and there's literally a mirror with two or three lines and a rolled up whatever it was. And I had never ever done, I literally like looked. It was like a Woody Allen movie. I was looking at, I was staring at it for probably 5 minutes. It seemed like an hour. I was staring at this thing, and of course I partook. I was impressionable. I was 20, 21 years old then. So,
but yeah, I would hear there's some, what's the Tower Records has the documentary about having it in their budget, right? Under rocket fuel or jet fuel or something like that.
I mean,
yeah.
it was everywhere, you know. I mean, obviously yeah, record guys, promo guys. Now we'll get there. Your turn. We'll get there.
We'll get to just some more quick, basically only promo items, the live 10-inch for selling the drama. And I didn't realize it said this until I pulled it out again. Advance for college radio only. So I guess commercial stations didn't even get this. This is,
remember when that's a big thing. College radio, like in the, what is it, the 80s, became a huge thing.
Well, they basically made their own little industry with publications like CMJ, and then like the CDs I showed you earlier, they would have their own CDs they would send out. And I have those too.
College, and they were playing the stuff that radio wasn't playing, then like REM and those.
But they had their own little system going. That's what a lot of people don't realize. Now there were college stations where people were playing whatever they want, sure, but there were also ones where college stations were reporting what they were playing to this CMJ thing they were listing, and it was kind of like this little miniature radio industry with ads, and it was all the college stuff. So it was, I think that started in the 80s, and that's why that got, high school kids is what listened to college music, and college people were too busy doing college stuff. Here's an example of this isn't actually promotional, but it's just a interesting record. Again, showing stuff that's probably not been on the channel before. Suicidal Tendencies. And one of those got to be very careful when you play these. Shaped records where you have to understand it's still you don't put the needle up here.
What song is that? What song is that?
I'll Hate You Better. From 94. Yeah, but I'll Hate You Better from Suicidal Tendencies. So
those are cool, but they're so silly.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I mean, they look great and everything, but you can't, I mean, one little slip and that thing is going to come around and just jerk the stylus right out of your cartridge, probably. Picture
discs were always a promo thing first, and I remember excuse me, like Bruce Springsteen, Darkness, and a Warren Zevon, Werewolves in London, but they weren't sold commercially. Sometimes they would release things commercially too, but those type of things initially were just for promo.
I think that's great for a promo, perfect, because like I was saying about the promos I experienced, is people considered those something to frame or something to, a keepsake or something. They didn't really consider them something to actually go home and play on a turntable. And I think picture discs, a lot of people think the same way about those. They don't sound great. But I want to say something really quick about Capitol. We were talking really briefly. If you see something on Capitol, they don't have, as far as I know, they don't have white label promos. They never really delved
I
in
don't remember
promotional
seeing one.
only.
No.
Yeah,
Warner
so
Brothers,
anything on Capitol
Columbia.
is going to have the hole or the thing, and they're basic just retail versions that have a hole in them. So if you see the Beatles, it probably meant, or this Iron Maiden, I don't think this Iron Maiden was ever in a bargain bin. It means it was it's just done for radio. This is like this is later pressing, like a 90, 89
Yeah,
pressing.
it is kind of sad that they didn't have at least a sticker or something, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's why there's no Beatles white label promos. There's no
Right.
Yeah, it's all just hole punches in generic albums.
This is one of my very favorites and one of the greatest sounding records in my collection. And Warner Brothers put this out, and this actually goes for a lot of money now, somewhat. I mean, I think they're like $75 or up. If you find this 12-inch single of You Can Go Your Own Way, and I got this before Rumors came out, and it's 45 RPM, and there's a mono and stereo version, because we know at the time, a lot of, especially AM radio, would play the mono versions. That's why a lot of times on 45s, you see white label promos or mono, the same track for radio, as you know, has a mono one side, stereo on the other side. But it has 2 songs, and both songs are repeated on stereo and mono. And this got a lot of airplay because it had Silver Springs, which was a Stevie Nicks song, which wasn't on Rumors. I would argue it's better. I can't remember which song. They should have put Silver Springs on Rumors instead of one song that I'm forgetting which song.
Wait, Oh Daddy or Songbird?
Maybe Songbird is the one.
I never cared for either of those two.
And this got, at least in the Bay Area, Silver Springs got a shitload. It turned up on a comps years later, you know, but CD comps, but really great. But Go Your Own Way, you know how bombastic that song is, the guitars and the drums on that. This 45 RPM version is friggin' amazing. So if you see this, it's again, mono, promotion, not for sale. Pick it up. If you might get lucky and find it cheap, but I think on Discog, maybe it's $50 now. I don't know, $75. I know when I was looking at one point at it, or when I was discogging it, I'm surprised how much it was going for.
Yeah. Example of a radio promo that's basically a single that's extended with bonus tracks. This used to be kind of sought after from Uncle Tupelo, who are from around here. This is their long cut single, but it has live versions of Anodyne and Truck Driving Man, and a great live version of We've Been Had on here when these guys, Uncle Tupelo, and then later split up and became either Sunvolt or Wilco. When Wilco decided to tell people that they were no longer a St. Louis band and started calling themselves a Chicago band, my cat pissed all over it. So he didn't care for that at all. So rare promotional item. Not probably worth anything, thanks to a cat with a urinary infection.
Okay, I got a 3-pack here. They're not in order, but 3 Ramones promos, and the second one. This is their second album, right? What I wanted to show. This one's a little different because when I got this, I was working in a small Bay Area chain, small, maybe a dozen stores, which is actually considered big these days. But compared to Tower and Sam Goody's, and the Warehouse, it was considered a small regional chain. And we would get dictated by our main office occasionally, like it says, provided in the hope that you will play this in store, promo copy not for resale. So they got hep to the whole thing of people selling promo copies, which wasn't a new thing by the time I was there. It was happening way back, very mafia.
Yeah, same thing with radio, same thing.
Yeah. But they put this, we were required, like we'd had to play it, you know, every hour, every 2 hours, depending on what the record was, for a week or a month, depending on probably what the company was greasing back to us, or basically giving us free product or discounted product. And that's part of the business model. It's not really a payola thing. It's, you know, we'll give you an extra cut. You know, we would have, for instance,
it's literally called plugola.
but it would be, but it's like if you see now an ad for Best Buy and you have a big Sony ad. Sony is co-opting.
Oh, it's everything. Yeah, sure. It's like the movie Wall Street. It's all acceptable now.
Exactly. But we would have, for instance, Warner Brothers month, or you'd have Columbia month, and
for the month of August, everything on RCA
That
Records
is
will be
so
on.
they're using the store as like a mini radio station, basically.
Oh yeah, we would do it
Wow.
all the time. You'd go to Tower Records, you'd see the WIA sale. Well, the WIA sale was always confusing to people because the average yodel, no offense, yodel, there's a yodel sitting right there, doesn't know what WIA is. WIA is Warner Electra Atlantic, that
Yeah.
combination. So WIA sale, I remember when I just before I worked in a record store, I went to a discount record store and there was a sign up and it says non-such sale. And I didn't know what non-such records was. I said, well, what do you mean you're not having, no, there's no such sale?
Right.
But I thought that was pretty cool on this one. This is obviously a promo. And I don't think these are white labels. I think these are just the regular, the regular Sire record label. But they're pristine copies. And of course, the Phil Spector produced record, this one. So it's kind of cool having these 3 records promos, and I like it because also for some reason, luckily I kept them in like pristine shape because for 20 years from 1995 to maybe 2010, my records were stored because of CD rush. So
right,
they were like in a time capsule or sealed in my own warehouse for 15 years and kept in pristine shape.
I just have I have one last like promo thing to show with kind of a story with it. This is I was showing earlier how the labels used to or the publications used to send out CDs, and everybody would send out CDs, CD singles and all that kind of stuff. They would also send out full CDs with a variety of whatever they were pushing that month or whatever. Here's one from Warner Brothers, and since we're doing this for rock radio and it's the 90s, here's what they decide to call it. Now, it's interesting because if you'll notice here, the first track is track 2. You were talking about
hold that steady up. Let me see it. Okay.
Oh, whoops. I thought I was way off. Whoop.
There we go. Yeah, everything's backward. It's like pretend your computer is reading Hebrew from right to left.
Yeah. I've been, come on. It's not going to happen. I've had so much practice with this and I'm just not catching it. But so track 2 is the listed first. You were talking about the white label thing and how that made it easy for DJs on records and you could be able to see it. Why in the world would they purposely put out a promotional item so confusing? Well, this
because
Biohazard, the reason this is called F the Rules is because this Biohazard Authority song says that almost immediately when you play it. Again, why would you have a song that says F the rules, F the rules, F the rules, F the rule? Why would you send that to a radio? And I don't mean it says F, I mean it says the word. If you say that word too many times in a row, YouTube gets upset. So I
just have to click when I post this that no children can watch because I said
no, but if you say that word like rapid fire. And so I used to be on this show when Sunday nights with this other guy, and it was like an alternative to we were on a rock station. This was like the newer like alternative show or whatever. And he decides he wants to play track 1 off here, which is not listed. It's Jane's Addiction and Tahitian Moon. I think we used to have that too, where stuff would show up with no label on it, or it's a mystery song. And who is it? Jane's Addiction, Tahitian Moon was one of the songs that were promoted that way. But so that's actually track 1. So he wanted to play that. So he puts in a CD and thinks that Biohazard is track and plays Biohazard by accident. It's going F the rules, F, live on the air, no delay. And instead of panicking and turning it off, this guy sits there and puts his tongue in his cheek and gives the CD player this angry, disapproving look like, you better knock it off. I'm like, dude, you better stay. And it just keeps, I mean, literally the F word like 14 times in the span of 7 seconds. So I never understood, you talking about earlier about making it easy. This is the antithesis of that. Let's put a profanity laden song on a CD, trip people up into playing it by, making track 2 the first track you see, and ship that out to radio stations. And let's just see what happens.
I wasn't going to go to something else, but just because you posted, I have to go here first. So I'm out of order, but not that they're really in order. One of my best friends ended up after the we worked together in stores, worked for Polygram, and he worked for them at the time where I would get in promos of Donna Summer, Village People,
Kiss. I was never a Kiss fan. I should have kept all those. I remember getting promo copies of the solo records with their faces, you know.
Yeah,
And
those are some cut corner classics too.
I never played any of that shit. And I virtually gave them away. But he did give me these, which I kept. And you talked about auditioning. First of all, how cool was that? Like Zappa in blackface. No comment there. But read that hype sticker.
Another Zappa album.
Yeah.
Please.
And of
audition
course,
for
this
airplay.
one, these are radio promo copies.
Yeah.
They're gold stamp copies. They're not white labeled, and they sound awesome. These two records. In fact, I didn't get into them for years, but I played them recently again, and they really sound great. And was it one of these is Bobby Brown and Catholic Girls and Jewish Princess? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, the warning stickers, and I love how it says, and we talked a little bit about this, loaned for promotional use, as if they're going to knock on your door one day and say, Joe Maslov, I gave you those records 40 years ago, because people were selling them a lot. And the whole idea was they're just loaning these to you. You don't own them, which is kind of bullshit. But review lyrics.
So that if you sell them, you're basically selling stolen property because you're selling their property.
Exactly. So these are, I mean, great copies. Again, the white label promos, and promos are usually early in the stampers. And, you know, it's not an exact science, but in theory, they sound better if they're not the ones these stations actually played for 3 years or 4 years or something.
Something I never encountered in radio, but you were talking about before, is the whole because you don't deal with, you know, cost or pricing in radio, is the whole way that like CBS, for one, used to change their entire jacket labels and everything just to change the code for a price code. That's something I used to take pride in, knowing all the codes of every label. And Columbia is an easy one. For example, when I first started and before me, they were either C or CS. And the CS would be the stereo, the C would be the mono. And if it was a CS, the records were, I think they were $4.98 list price. That was a manufacturer suggested list price. And the discount chains like Towers, a $4.98 would probably sell for $1 less. So $4.98 would sell for $3.98 or $3.49, you know, and so on down the line. And then what will happen is 2 or 3 years later, whenever it was when they raised the list price from $4.98 to $5.98, it would change the code. So it would be a KC. So in Columbia, KC was a $5.98 list price. Now, what would happen is that's why sometimes you look at your copies and you would see a little wraparound that have the KC covering the CS or whatever it was. And that was a $5.98. PC was a $6.98. So the PC would cover the KC. And then of course, the next subsequent pressing would be all corrected. But you know, whatever they had in their warehouse, they'd have to go, I assume it was machine. I don't know if they did it by hand. They'd go through every copy they had in stock, add the different code, reseal the record. I just think that's great. I mean, they couldn't have come up with an easier way to do price coding
Well,
rather
this
than
is before computers. This is before computers. This is before all the coding, before barcodes, all that. You know, I had to run the master cards and the master charge through the machine. And if it was over some, I'd have to get on the phone and call up to get an authorization. It was like a shit show retail in those days.
Right. So would you say then, like with Columbia, if K is the big one and then it changes to F,
PC
to P.
Now there are other sub labels.
Is K then always the best sounding one because it's first?
No, it's nothing to do with sounding. No, it's nothing to do with sounding. That's just
right. But K's first though, right? So those would be earlier pressings because they're more expensive.
No, C was first.
No, I'm not talking about chronologically. I mean, like, well, I am, but they kind of discontinued the C, right?
Yeah, C and then K, C and then PC. Now there were sub labels like Epic there was KZ, like these sub labels. Remember, there's all these custom labels, like Philly International was a custom label
specifically
of
with Columbia. Would the higher priced one be like an earlier pressing, therefore better sounding?
Nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. I mean, no, it's nothing to the price. That's just a pricing thing. So
so ones would come out cheaper and then they would go up in price sometimes.
Yes, but
Okay,
then
so
some,
then that's
but
why
not
that wouldn't
every,
work.
but when they would raise a list price, not everything would go up. They would keep certain records that maybe were catalog
Oh,
style
sure.
at a cheaper thing. And there's the famous thing, which I'm going to get into right now because of, is it your turn actually? Did you
Oh,
finish or
yeah, I just had a real quick, not a
go ahead?
promotional item, but we were talking about radio and whatever. I mean, this is how a lot of stuff was played. There
Oh,
wasn't a
carts.
promotional thing anyway.
Yeah.
You just put in a cart and then, you know, whatever the hit was, and then when that hit died out, you erased it and put the new hit on there. It's a little bit
And
like
you'd
an
have,
8-track,
and
but the
you'd
thing
have those
flips
as
up in there.
for your bumpers too, right? You'd have
Oh
those
yeah,
for,
yeah,
yeah,
commercials, yeah, sweepers, everything, sound
yeah.
effects. I think
And
it's Wayne's World where the guy goes in and he's doing all this crazy. Yeah, that's
you'd have the
pretty much what it was
celebrities like this is Johnny Marr from the Smiths, and you're listening to
Oh yeah,
KKKK, whatever.
oh
You
yeah.
know.
I used to
Um,
have my answering machine used to be Sammy Hagar. I had
you
him
can't.
slip one of those in there while he was doing like station
This is
IDs.
Robert Fiffin, and he can't drive 55.
Right, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, well, yeah, other people, but I would never have those cheesy ones. But yeah,
Uh,
there's some real cheesy.
After I quit my, I graduated and quit my record store job and went to Europe for a bunch of months. I came back and it took me a while, but I got a job for ABC Records, San Francisco office. And the first thing I was working on, we were still promoting a record that came out in 77. This was 78, but the record was huge. And obviously the record was Steely Dan Asia. So obviously people to this day think it's one of the greatest sounding records. And I had probably a box, hundreds of these, of this 12-inch of Asia, of Josie. And this is again a white label promo, and it's got a stereo version and actually they're both stereo. So they're both exactly the same. I don't know why. It was the double A side of the same friggin' thing. But again, it sounded so much better. This sounds amazing. We didn't realize how great it sounded in those days. I had good stereo, but it wasn't this audiophile bullshit that the kids are into today. But I had tons of these. And then the first one that came out when I worked there was this Steely Dan record. Now, this was the comp, and we pushed the hell out of this too, because this is where buy all the hits, but there's one song you couldn't get
Oh,
before.
sure, sure.
And
Mama told me not to come. 14 Three Dog Night Hits, but we can't put that on there.
Here at the Western World, we push that. It's a great song. It's not maybe a hit single type song, but I want to say about this, I literally had hundreds of, I had probably 5-6 boxes of this, even when I left the record business, and I got rid of them all. I sold them all when I got dumped, when ABC got bought out by MCA. I got laid off and then rehired for MCA for maybe less than a year just during the transition. But those of you like Steely Dan, this is a fantastic sounding record. I mean, for a comp, this is a great sounding record. And the first new record that I pushed, and I helped make this record a hit. And this talks about retail, where my job was in promotion and merchandising. So I'd bring posters and merch stuff to the Tower Records, put up displays when it was our turn. But every Monday I had to call 10 accounts that we knew reported to Billboard, Cashbox, and those things. And so this is, you're talking about greasing the wheel. You'll say, okay, this is the second Tom Petty album. The single was Listen to Your Heart from You're Gonna Get It. I remember I was really shy about calling people and talk to the person I found out who would report to Billboard and say, we're really working this. Do you think you could give Listen to Your Heart? Do you think you can give it in your top 10 this week? Because they'd get called, and supposedly we weren't supposed to know what stores were getting called. And those of you out there in the world, you might have heard something called Soundscan. Soundscan didn't come about till the 90s. So basically all your top selling records, some of them were bullshit. Like there's a certain joke that of a certain record, it shipped gold, returned platinum, which means that it got a shitload into the stores because Columbia or ABC, Warner Brothers, wants to just front load the stores with product and thinking it's going to be a big seller when it comes out. Like the movie studios, the first weekend, they want everyone in their chairs. But then the record stores or chains return 90% of the product. A good
The Kiss
example is,
solo albums that you were talking about earlier, those Kiss
were
solo
they like
albums,
that?
I called those cut corner classics because they were notorious for overthinking, thinking that people were just going to buy these things up, and it didn't happen until, of course, later on.
Yeah, ownership by ABC, sale is unlawful. So I would have to call these up, and but SoundScan, that's why some of you people remember Garth Brooks? All of a sudden, when SoundScan started, country music was at the top of the charts because a lot of stores, it wasn't cool to say, oh, we sold a shitload of Garth Brooks records or whatever the country artist is. But they found through SoundScan, those were actual sales. So the register, a computer generated thing. So they found out that, Jesus Christ, that's selling. Rap is selling. All these, the urban stuff is selling too in the country. So all these hip artists that were kind of getting on the charts in a way. Now, that's a simplistic take on it, but there was some truth to that. So SoundScan, you could really legitimize actual sales rather than some yoho like me calling up Robert and saying, hey, Robert, can you give Tom Petty a top 10 or at least if you can't do that, a top 15, we're trying to get it up.
There's something similar to that with radio. I mean, we had that's part of the it's a big part of the job when you're a program director is just dealing with working with record labels and then promotional teams and whatever with labels and
exactly,
whatever. And
exactly.
it's the same type of deal where you have stations that are monitored. You have this these groups, specifically one major group that I think it's a lot of it's changed with streaming, but back before streaming, they would they would be paid. These people would be paid to just sit and listen to radio stations and log everything.
Yep.
And it was called BDS, and your station was either BDS monitored or it wasn't. And if your station was BDS monitored, or it was some stations were BDS monitored only during the daytime or whatever. And if your station was BDS monitored, you got a little more clout, a little more whatever, because your plays were true. If your station was not BDS monitored, you can just write down, sure, we played this 20 times and that. And it didn't hold nearly as much weight because so you
I had a
kind of two different.
I had a girlfriend 77 to 79, and she was a weekend DJ at KSAN Radio, KSAN in San Francisco. And I remember that because they'd have the books. It's book time basically when it's ratings period, and they'd have to log in the things differently, and you'd have to really write down and log in what you're playing. And I mean, that station at the time had a program. It was programmed, but the DJs did have a lot of freedom. There's certain things they kind of had to play sort of, but they were open to, whatever they were in the mood for, especially her, because she was on Saturday and Sundays, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So you're not drive time or you're not the morning drive or anything. Okay, are you finished? I'm just going to close out.
Yeah,
I'm closing out with two things that don't really relate, but I'm going to do it because this is my friggin' channel, so I'm going to do whatever I want to do.
F the rules, as we said before.
No rules. This is a cool one because Elvis Costello's Almost Blue album, the one he did the cover countries or country-ish covers. This is cool and it's really interesting. Elvis introduces his country favorites, and he actually talks in between each track, introducing the track. So this isn't a copy that you would have if you bought it. It was never for sale. There were certain records like this that were just, issued like this. So I don't think it's something that would get a lot of airplay on a radio station unless you're really into something. But a DJ could take it home, or a program director, or a person like me, and listen to it. And of course, you can't. It's not the thing you play all the time. It's like a one or two off. And if you're a freak like me, and like Elvis. So it's kind of a cool promo. And I'm going to end with this. When John Lennon had his comeback, before we heard the whole album, the single was Starting Over. And I got this from my friend at Warner, which is Geffen Records, distributor by WEA. And it's a 12-inch single, and it's just like Starting Over. It's just kind of Elvis homage,
Yeah,
it's a Prussian thing. But I remember this is 1980. This is what, October 1980, just 2 months before he passed. And I played it and I really liked it. It was great to hear John's voice again after 5 years of retirement. He came back. But I thought it was a little kind of retro. And this is the time with punk and post-punk was happening, and dance music was happening. And I turned it over and played Yoko's Kiss, Kiss, Kiss.
and I was blown away. I was floored. I mean, you could talk about her orgasm in the last minute of the song, whatever, but the the drums on this, the bass on this, the guitar, and just the thumping vocal on it on this 45 RPM I was just blown away, and I was really excited about it. I was more blown away by Kiss 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 than Starting Over. Now, once the album came out, of course, I loved Watching the Wheels and Beautiful Boy and you know, all the other songs, but that's my last thing. And of course, 2 months later, we know what happened
Right.
after that came out. So record business, fun and funky, and it was a
Yeah.
fun time, wasn't it? Isn't it a fun time?
Yeah, because what happens now is there's not a lot of that product going around. It's basically, you know, you just get everything sent to you digitally, and you know, just download the thing. It'll be available at this time, and you know, done. And you don't even touch it. You know, it's all just files going around. So yeah, great to look back on for
And
me,
it's
it
like,
was the '90s. It was the mid '90s to the early 2000s.
but it's
of all
like, and
this
now it's also,
promo
and
stuff.
again, I feel like an old fart, you know, back in my day, but
Right. Yeah.
it's the algorithms that are programming things in some cases. And okay, you like this artist, you want that artist, and you know, I'm not
Oh,
a
sure. For
streamer.
the streaming stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but in a way that is good because people can get turned on to music. It's not for me. Whenever people ask me what streaming service I use, I don't. I just don't. I have so much music. I choose not to.
Right. And I've heard that, you know, streaming stuff with the changing things around, YouTube now is incorporating actual music videos into albums. So there goes the album version. Now you're going to get the single version that the music video is with all the music videos effects right in the middle of listening to an album, and
Wow.
albums disappear. And, you know, it just, yeah, it's better to have it to where you can touch it and
Video
hang
killed the
on to
radio
it.
star. Yeah, video
Yeah.
killed the radio star
Video
again.
did not kill the radio star.
I
Video
know.
made the radio star much more popular. I
It
mean,
did,
if you know
didn't
the
it?
history of it, it really rejuvenated music all around, and radio benefited from that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the RIAA, which is the Record Association Industry of America or something, always wants to have their thing. It's like home taping is killing the record business, and they
Yes.
put the Maxell TDK.
It's very
tax.
similar to YouTube now, finally figuring out, you know, we can actually partner with these music publishing companies. And if people want to just throw their music up, then we can send the money to the publishing company. We don't need to ban people and cut up videos. We're just pay the man. So I think YouTube is that's kind of similar to what's going on now.
Yeah,
They're finally figuring it out.
this is great discussion. We're going to end this now, and I think we just have about a little over an hour maybe, but thank you, Robert. Radio
Thank you
and records, retail.
for making
What a
my idea come to life.
this is a great, you know, I've been thinking about things like this, and it's best to do it with someone who was doing it too in a different venue. And I just
Exactly.
love, I could go on these discussions. We could go on these for hours. Maybe we'll do a follow-up of some
Yeah.
kind similar. So I'm going to stop this. Hang on there. Mazzy loves you. I don't know if Robert loves you, but
It's tempered.
thanks.
Everything in moderation.